Hello, everybody. Welcome to CTO Craft Bytes. So today we're going to look at the pros and cons of hybrid working. If this is your first time at CTO Craft Bytes, let me tell you a little more about this group. It's a mentoring, or CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders around the world, focused on supporting leadership growth. And it has over 5,000 members. CTO Craft provides them with one-to-one coaching, mentoring groups, a curated Slack community, and events like this one. Huge thanks to our headline partner, Amazon Web Services, for helping make these Bytes events possible. So my name is Adam Leon-Smith. I am the CTO of a company called Dragonfly in the UK. And with me, I have three panelists. First of all, I have Dileep Marway. Dileep, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Dileep Marway. I work for The Economist in Birmingham. And I look after quality assurance and DevSecOps. So I've been there for 3.5 years. We've been building an engineering center of excellence in Birmingham. And I'm very passionate about all things QA. That's what I've been doing for the majority of my career. And then most recently, I've been looking after DevSecOps.
Fantastic. Okay, we also have Nadia Alramli. Nadia, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Adam. I'm Nadia Alramli. I am a director of engineering in HubSpot. HubSpot is a marketing, sales, and services software company, and we build software that help businesses grow. I run the group responsible for a lot of our marketing tools, so from marketing, email, ads, social, publishing, marketing orchestration, etc. And throughout my career, I had honestly a lot of experience working with teams across locations, time zones, different models of working remote and flexible, etc. So I'm very happy to be here with you.
Thanks, Nadia. And we also have Anna Dick. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Anna. I'm currently CTO for a company called Hiring Hub. That's a recruitment tech business. I've worked in and around software development teams for a good 20 years with various sizes of teams, various locations and various structures. So really looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. Okay, so if anybody has questions, feel free to just add them in the questions panel as we go along. We'll probably come to questions towards the end after we've talked to all the panelists. I think I'm also running a poll, so hopefully you'll see a little poll which you can complete during the webinar if you wish, about how you're thinking about coming back from lockdown into a more hybrid working mode, or if you're not thinking about hybrid working and you're just going back like you used to. So this topic's really interesting. So I've been talking to a lot of CTOs and engineering leaders and product managers about how they're going to return. I've spoken to about 12, and we recently released a report about all those experiences and views and thoughts about how we come back. And I'll post a link later on in the chat if anyone's interested in that report. Anna, I know you contributed to it as well, so thank you for that. I think one thing that really struck me is there's a lot of dilemmas and questions that everyone's trying to answer. I think I've spoken to people who've spent their office budget on developers. I've spoken to people who are worried about infrastructure. If they come back 2 days a week, does that mean everybody needs laptops? What about the developers that need high-spec desktops, multiple screens and things like that? I've spoken to lots of people who have hired someone fully remote or not in their primary location, and I've done this as well, during the pandemic because they had the opportunity to. And if they go back to the office, what happens to those people? Are they going to stay fully remote or do they have to move? Some people have really difficult home environments. A lot of us have recognized the productivity benefits of working from home. We don't get distracted as much, and that isn't right for every task, but that's been really beneficial for some people. But lots of people don't have that quiet environment at home. Maybe they have a pet or a family or just some construction going on. And some people I've spoken to recently who've started trying to go back to the office are shocked at how noisy they now find the office environment. They're really, really noticing it compared to before. So it's not a simple decision, and it's not necessarily something that people can make decisions about at a company policy level. A lot of people have also talked about how they empower teams and individuals to be the most productive in a hybrid working environment. So I think we'll start by talking about people's experiences at the start of lockdown and going into lockdown, and how they had to adapt. So, Dileep, can I ask you first? How did you find it at first going into a lockdown environment?
Sure. So I think we partly started to work in this way, I'd probably say 2 years ago. So even before lockdown, there was a need to actually adapt and work in this way. So my team is located in different countries. So part of my team is based in India, part of my team is based in Slovakia, part of my team is based in Belarus. So there's a whole difference in terms of people's start times and actually collaborating with them. So I haven't found it much different, if I'm honest. The one thing that I probably have missed the most is sort of the time when you need to collaborate, the time when you need to whiteboard, or the time where you need to foster that collaboration. For instance, when you have a new person on board, those are the things that I probably miss. But I think you start to adapt, you start to use tools that work for you. So essentially, I'd probably say that it hasn't felt very different. I think what I probably found now is it will be moving out of the norm that I've come to expect now for the past year or so. So just to see how I move now from this step, because we've had one of our most successful years at The Economist. And it's very weird for me to say that in COVID times, right? So I think we will have to find our new normal. But I'd probably say for me, I've quite enjoyed the time with my family.
Very good. How about you, Anna?
So I think coming at it from quite a different angle. So we were a very small, highly collaborative kind of startup moving to scale up team. We were at the start of our kind of big product journey. So we wanted to be very close to the business, and everybody was co-located at our office in Manchester. And being quite a young, not in age, but in terms of the time we've been together team, we were highly collaborative. Our systems and our processes weren't necessarily very mature. So when we kind of instantly obviously dispersed and everybody was at home, that was quite different from us in terms of we haven't necessarily written everything down. We didn't necessarily have the systems and processes in place that allowed us to very quickly move to working remotely. Now, it didn't take a long time to develop those processes, but it was a level of maturity that as a startup moving to a scale up, we weren't maybe going to do overnight, and we were starting to develop those processes. Just even, writing down ideas. We had Post-its, we had everything on the walls. So just that transition of moving everything onto Miro boards, moving tickets into Trello so we could share and collaborate remotely, was a very steep learning curve for us. But I think now that we've done that, it's kind of just accelerated that maturity. And now we can work really well remotely. And obviously the challenge is now that hybrid model and moving back into the office, where we still want to do collaboration sessions, but we have taken the opportunity to recruit 100% remote people whilst we've been in lockdown as well. So it's interesting about how we're going to build that model moving forward.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that I guess we don't want out of hybrid working is what we used to have in terms of you're all in a conference room and there's someone on one of those starfish-shaped phones who can't really hear what's going on in the meeting because they're fully remote. So I don't think that's what anyone means by hybrid, and that's a real challenge. How about you, Nadia? How did you find it?
There's a lot of similarities with what Dileep and Anna said. I think there are some interesting factors as well. So for HubSpot, we had a very, very strong office culture. We prided ourselves on having great benefits. We provided lunch, breakfast. We had very nice equipment, nice offices, a lot of events, board games, video games. I remember after lunch hour, a lot of people would gather and either play video games or watch others playing video games, or people just go and chat in various areas. And this is just a very lively, very nice office environment, and we loved it. Then COVID happened, and there's a lot of factors here. It's not just the fact that you're forced to work remotely. There's a pandemic, there's panic, there's anxiety, there's the unknown, right? So it's not a normal environment of, okay, let's prepare to work in a hybrid environment. It was like no preparations, couldn't even get your stuff from the office at some point. You're just, okay, and from now on, you're working from home. So obviously there was a period of, adjustment period. You're still trying to get used to what's going on. I really feel lucky that I felt the company really adapted very quickly, and it provided me with the tools that I needed as a manager to adjust my work style and learn to how adapt to this really, really new situation. And it was very early on, relatively speaking. In August last year, we announced that hybrid is the future of work, and announced that we were going to let people choose to work either remotely, flex, or from the office. That is very early. That's one of the first companies that came. Was in fact, and the first I knew of at the time, anyway. And that was, a very daring move, because it didn't even require the manager approval. We're saying if you are in a role that allows you to do it, you can choose it. And we adjusted all our onboarding to be remote first, etc. And again, I do want to say as well, like there's also a lot of interesting things to take into account, like how do you change your business model as well to support other businesses that might be also going through the same transition. For us, we're a B2B. We support a lot of businesses, right? Like we are a B2B company, so that was really an interesting transition, and that's also another factor. When it comes, like, if you want to recognize that the future of work is hybrid, and it's not just a passing thing that is happening because of COVID, then that also applies to how you operate altogether.
One thing that's struck me, though, is it's the more senior people are obviously find it easier to work without the help of colleagues and things like that. And they're also more likely to have more money, a larger house, a better office environment. And I don't think experiences of working from home are the same across different groups. So at my company, we have a lot of apprentices. Well, not a lot, but we have a significant number. And, they in particular are notable for not, they've struggled more with the home working environment. There's a really interesting study from 2013 where a huge company, thousands of people, a call center company in Asia, said, let's try it, like everybody working from home, and see how that affects productivity. So they took half their company, X thousand people, and said, you're all working from home for the next year. They took the other half and said, you're the control group, you have to go to the office. And they saw a productivity benefit around 13% immediately. But after a few months, some of the people who were in the work from home group started complaining, that we want to come back to the office, this isn't working for us. So they changed their approach, and they said, actually, if you want to come in the office, you can. And then the productivity benefit doubled, because the people that were struggling to work from home self-selected to come into the office. So it's interesting what you say, Nadia, about giving people the choice, because empowering individuals to make their own choices, individuals and teams, I think is really the key to how we come out of this.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things, isn't it? That we've certainly identified that there isn't one blanket solution for everybody. People's environments, people's situations are different. The type of work they might be doing at a specific time might suit being at home. Sometimes it may be deep work that they can do on their own. But equally, people might need to do deep work but not have an environment at home that is, especially during the pandemic. I had my daughter constantly bashing in behind meetings and things. I would have loved to have been able to go into the office for events like this to get peace and quiet, to assure that I could have the space. So I think definitely understanding different people's needs and letting them choose as well.
So Nadia, you said you decided very early on how you were going to work. And I think a lot of us, especially in the smaller businesses, are still trying to decide. Be interesting to hear from you all about what options you've considered about how you might go back, even if you've ruled some of them out. Dileep, do you want to go first?
Sure. So at the moment, we're considering the hybrid from a 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. So that's what's being considered. But I think, like Nadia said, I like the idea of actually finding your own new normal. So it's actually trying it first and seeing what people feel and making sure that people are empowered to do it. Because I think the key thing is the output, right? The key thing is actually meeting your objectives, making sure that the company makes the growth and the revenue that it expects. And then essentially you need to find your normal. So I think the big thing for me is just making sure that you find what that normal is. I don't know if that will work for us, but you need to find that type of approach really, and just talking to people, understanding people's views. And the way that we've built the Birmingham practice from scratch has been with culture at mind. So actually building with culture at mind allows you to grow, but to do that you have to listen to people's opinions. So I think we need to find our normal, to be honest.
Interesting. What about you, Anna? What have you thought of the options?
So we haven't decided to specify anything. I think we're like everything, being a small team, we can kind of still go through that kind of test and learn process, and it's a little bit easier to do it. We're experimenting at the minute around collaboration times, rather than saying 3 days here or 2 days. It might be that, for example, from the tech product team perspective, that they want to collaborate around planning work, or maybe there's a new problem workshop that we want to do. And I think that's how we'll focus time around the office. We also now have 100% remote developers, so we're kind of figuring out how that works when you're doing those collaboration sessions in the office. We've invested in a webcam. We're going to try and get that set up on one of our boards and see whether we can get that kind of working from an interactive perspective. But again, we're a small team, 1 or 2 remote developers, and I appreciate as the team grows and scales, having to leverage additional technology, because it's not, if everybody's remote, I think we've got that okay, we've got that working. And if everybody's in the office, I think we can do that. Socially distanced workshops, we've done a few, which have been great. But it's when you try and put the two together and you've got that mixed whilst you're trying to do kind of collaboration type session and how you get that working. So it'd be interesting to hear anybody that's managed to kind of get that working really well.
I failed at this a couple of weeks ago. I invited one of my dev teams in for the day, and some people a few hundred miles away, so I had to travel. And we spent the day on social events, collaboration, design, planning future sprints out and things like that. And it was absolutely fantastic. But I had my product manager who was in a different country, who was, and I've forgotten how to work all the tech these days, like laptops, getting them working. I'd forgotten the Wi-Fi password for the office. There was so many problems trying to get that one person into the meeting. It was really hard. And one of the things that worries me about coming back X days per week is not only the infrastructure question, but how do I translate that into a real estate requirement? How do I, what's the point in one person coming in or 2 people coming in if they're not actually working together? It really feels like bringing everyone in at the same time is a better solution, but I don't know. Nadia, what are your thoughts? I mean, is there some optionality? And I think you're giving your staff quite flexible options, right?
We have, yeah. I mean, we did a lot of research behind it. It wasn't like a rash decision. We ran surveys, we asked people, we asked managers. There were surveys targeting people and managers, so asking them, like, how are you feeling about working from home? Do you feel like you have everything you need? We had a generous stipend as well for people that they can spend as they wish. It wasn't like, you expense this, or there's a generous stipend you can use for anything you wish, just to deal with working from home. And the pandemic in general. But then we asked managers, like, how do you feel about managing remote teams? How do you feel about hybrid working? And we went, studied those results and made the decision to move forward. And it wasn't just a decision, let's go and give people the choices. It was very well planned. For example, like we're saying, so like some people ask me, how are you allowing this without asking manager approval? Like, what if somebody who can't work well from home chooses to work from home? The thing is, we are really about using good judgment. It's actually one of our mottos is use good judgment. And to me, when it's a choice, after the pandemic, if somebody chooses to work from home, knowing they don't work well from home, that's on them. That's their choice. And if that impacts their performance, we would deal with it accordingly. So again, it's about trusting people to be reasonable, to be responsible with their own decision. They've been already working remotely. They know what it's like to work remotely. They're making an informed decision here. The other thing that we actually chose to also make our benefit location agnostic. That's a big step. That's something definitely, if you're going to go to a hybrid environment, you can't do it without being inclusive, regardless of location. So if you're going to start having, we had a benefit for, free lunch, free breakfast. So what does that mean? We need to think about, like, are we providing, we have a gym in the office, we have all of, so, how are we going to compensate for all of those benefits so you can still benefit even if you are remote? Those are all very important things. And the other thing here is also doing a lot of training for managers. Like, you can't, if being remote means that your opportunities are going to be taken away from you, that's going to become unfair, right? So, like, how are you going to make sure that everything the teams are doing are inclusive? We've actually been quite successful in brainstorming and collaboration work remotely. In fact, I maybe this is controversial, I would dare to say it's actually worked better for us because, with the technology, if you combine things like Lucid charts, Zoom, you can start having breaking rooms that you can do effectively in the office. Now you can have workshops that have 30 people. We've done those. And break them into 5-people groups that are answering specific questions, building charts, answering questions, and then combining them in different steps. And then we end up with a very interesting result that actually giving everyone a voice, and it's actually giving a psych-safe environment because you're breaking it into very small groups. That actually really, really worked well for us. We have very regular sessions like this, and it took there was some learning curve, but now very confident about running these kind of collaboration events remotely.
So someone in the chat's just mentioned tools. Nadia, you just mentioned some. Anna, you mentioned Miro boards as well before, as well as Trello. Are there any other tools and techniques you've been using with your teams to try and work better in a remote way, Dileep?
I think the big thing for me is having structure in terms of how you lead your staff. So whenever we have those one-to-ones, I find having a good structure to those and actually categorizing aspects. So the way I generally do it is high, medium, and low tasks, development. And then I also use sort of a, how do people feel? So I use a red, amber, green, and that's a consistent thing that I do. And if somebody is feeling green, great, we know there's no risk. But if somebody's actually amber or red, then it's my job to actually get them back to green. So essentially, I see that as a leadership point for me. But I think having a clear path, leading people and just asking people in these times, how are they? Little things like that will make a massive difference. So I've got staff in India at the moment, and the situation over there is terrible. And just the fact that reaching out to people and just asking them as many times in the day, how are you? How's your family? I think that's made a massive difference. But the tools are out there, and we use a lot of Slack. We do use Miro. That's worked really well. And then I think from a QA perspective, it's just great to pair. And from a DevSecOps perspective, it's great for people to just pair together, right?
Pairing is a good idea. That's a practice I haven't actually been using, but probably should have done.
On pairing, we have teams that have tried pair programming for onboarding, and literally they would have a Zoom ongoing and they share screen and work together. And I've heard many positive things about it. And also another pairing idea was we have a program for an onboarding buddy, and that's also pairing a person with another one that is as a peer for the most part. So it's not meant to be a supervisor. And again, just helping with socialization, answering questions that they might not want to ask anything about the company, and just having someone else that they can talk to. And again, that's also been really successful and positive for us.
Another thing you mentioned, Nadia, was about aligning benefits, making them location agnostic. One thing that's really, I think, yet to hit us really is the impact on the labour market, because in a way, the labour arbitrage that people have been able to do through things like offshoring that benefit seems like it's going to decrease quite rapidly as people go remote. And I don't think this has hit us yet, because when people are worried about economics, they don't change jobs. There was a survey by Microsoft about a month ago that said that 41% of people are planning a job change before the end of the year, either because they wanted to move on but haven't because they're worried about the market and the economy, or because they've just rethought their life during this rather bizarre period and really wanted to change how they work. Anna, have you seen any of this yet in your team?
Yeah, we've definitely seen it, because we have been trying to recruit, or we have been recruiting in the last probably 3 to 6 months. So I think at the start, we noticed that people didn't really want to move at all. And I think that was because obviously a lot of people were kind of in shock and didn't really know what was going on. I think as time's got on, there's been certain roles that have, when we've been looking to recruit, we found that a lot of junior people have maybe still been maybe younger, maybe earlier on in their career, have been looking for new roles and they've wanted to move on. Maybe they're already remote, a bit more flexible in terms of their situation. And also from a senior perspective, there's been some people that have been maybe looking to move to a lead dev, but that kind of middle section where we've been looking, kind of mid-developer section, we did find it quite hard to recruit for. Then when we opened up fully remote, obviously that's opened up a new kind of talent pool for us, because we'd always thought that we wanted everybody to be co-located. But, now having 100% remote developers, that's adding to the team. We've added more diversity to the team as well, which is great. People that maybe couldn't come into an office anyway for own personal circumstances for lots of different reasons now have access to many more jobs. And I think that's only positive for teams where you've got just more diverse makeup of people.
I like that you mentioned that. Sorry.
Go on, Nadia. Go on.
Just going to say, I really like that you mentioned diversity. We're seeing the same thing. I think that having that flexibility and also being open to more locations is very big factor that can really help with diversity.
Yeah. One of the, we've recently recruited for a part-time role, so I was very keen to make sure that was accessible to returners, whether that's you're returning because you've been caring during COVID or you're, a new mother kind of thing. And I think that the flexibility that we can now offer between, coming into the office maybe once or not even coming to the office, but then working your hours around whether that's your childcare or some caring responsibilities that you still have. It's great to be able to offer those opportunities to people.
What about you, Dileep? What have you seen in terms of the labour market and any changes there?
I think what I found right now in this current situation, because we're not in the office, I haven't seen any difference, so I can't really say. But what I am finding for more niche roles, for roles like security, so like a security engineer, it's a very competitive market, and that will mean that there may have to be a change in the behavior in terms of us saying those 3 days. It may be that we have to adapt in the situation, right? So I can't really say for now, but I would probably say in those type of niche roles, there may be something that changes our approach essentially.
Okay, so just on the diversity point, there's been some research that shows that diverse teams are more innovative, which makes sense, and subsequently more productive as well. And LinkedIn stats are very clear that certain age groups, women and some ethnic groups are more likely to apply for tech jobs. I'm sure these stats are based on the tech market, so they're probably demographically biased in some way anyway, so it's probably not 100% accurate. But there is definitely a big change in the ability to hire people who work from home and consequently more diverse groups. Okay, one thing that worries me is promotions and staff progression. How do we ensure that those fully remote workers don't end up being the ones that can't kind of take people out to the pub and socialize and make those informal relationships and mentoring relationships and things like that? How do we ensure they aren't negatively affected over time, that managers don't forget about them, if you like, because they don't see them face to face. What are your thoughts on that, Nadia?
It's funny. It's actually one of the questions we were also asked from the audience, and I think it's a very important question. We made a commitment to that from the beginning when we made the announcement. I think that's definitely something that would be on a lot of people's mind when making that decision. And we've done a lot of things. First of all, the fact that we were very transparent, like managers share where their choice, like a lot of, we know our executives, a lot of them chose work remote or flex, etc. We wanted to make sure that it's very clear that you can progress regardless. We also put very clear guidelines on how you can, for all role promotions, and in some cases, creating promotion committees that are reviewing things, just reviewing the promotion criteria based on all the different factors, ensure fairness, transparency, etc. It's something that we always need to be kept an eye on it. I think that it's a non-bias is actually the nearness of somebody. I'm not sure if I'm using the right term here, but it's one of the non-human biases that we definitely need to be aware of and actively fighting. And I think that ensuring that as managers that we are taking this very seriously, that we are providing equal opportunities, equal access to information, regardless of somebody's location, is just going to be essential. I don't think that anyone could claim that it's completely impossible for that to happen. I think acknowledging that this bias could exist and working against it is the way to go.
So I'm just looking at the question from the audience, which points out a study that found that people who were randomized to work from home after 21 months had almost half the promotion rate. So it is a real issue. Anna, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Nadia made some great points, but I do think that having kind of a fair and documented process and kind of educating the managers in order to make sure that everybody is treated the same, it's another kind of facet in the kind of equal and fair, whether that's in the recruitment process or the promotion process, that we need to consider. There are other elements that, from an equality point of view and fairness, that we've had to play in to ensure that, whether that's females get the roles or minority groups, or everything's much more fair and inclusive. And I think working remote work just becomes another kind of element within that that needs to be taken just as seriously as those other elements. But yeah, I think understanding and acknowledging that bias, and that it's something that we need to make sure we work towards, that inclusivity is important.
What do you think, Dileep?
I think completely. It's very important. It needs to be at the heart of everything that you do. So, because we built our Birmingham Engineering Hub from scratch, we felt that the old approaches in terms of career development were a bit outdated. So, actually having a performance review once a year, actually documenting that. So, what we actually did is I actually helped to put together a career development pack. And that essentially focuses on core competencies, which should be the same against every role. So whether you're in architecture, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in QA engineering, those core competencies essentially stay the same. And then you have role-specific skills for that role. And the manager or the leader and the employee would have a meeting to discuss career progression at least every 1 or 2 months. And it's in the employee's best interest to put those meetings in, because they care about their career. And what you do is you pick out 2 key areas. So if I wanted to work on delivery and I wanted to work on leadership, I would pick those 2 areas, show evidence that I've done those. So it doesn't actually matter if you're in the office or if you're outside the office. But also the advantage of this actual career framework is essentially, if I'm a level 2 in QA engineering, and I want to try something different in the organization, and a level 2 in engineering comes up, I can apply for that role. If I'm fit, I can move across. If I'm not actually at the same level, I may move down 1 level. So we put that in place, and we found having that and putting so much effort into doing that, it's now being rolled out company-wide at The Economist. And I trialed it in technology with some of my peers, and it hasn't made a difference whether we're at home or whether we're in the office. Essentially, development is development wherever you are, right?
Mm.
I think that's very important. I agree with you. Making sure that the promotion criteria is updated to reflect that location doesn't matter. Like, that should be absolutely there. I think another thing that should be missed is access to information, access to training opportunities, and all of those should be remote location agnostic. So those are a lot of things we're paying attention to. Is, sure, you might have the same criteria, but is there the same opportunity for learning and training? Are you going to have the same access to the same benefits whether you're in a different location to other people around you? So again, that's ensuring that, monitoring it, making sure that you're reviewing the promotion rates across those choices and keeping an eye on it are all very, very important factor. And I agree.
Access to information is really interesting. I think one of the things that a lot of people have said to me is the way they document things, or the amount of effort they put into their Jira stories has changed, because they're now working remotely. They're doing things differently to make sure information is stored in a way that people can access it. I know, for example, GitLab have the asynchronous working playbook, which is all about essentially working when everyone isn't in the same room at the same time. And they talk a lot about things like meeting minutes and things like that, so people can't attend a meeting, making sure that the information's there. I see we've actually got a question that I want to go to. Before I do that, can I just ask, if you haven't voted in the poll, if you can, because I'll read out the results towards the end, and you can get a bit of a view on what all the other guests are trying to do. So there's a question: is there an element of trust with remote workers, and how do you track productivity? So can I ask you if you've changed the way that you track productivity during the pandemic? Anna, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so we haven't changed it. I think we were already moving to use OKRs. I don't know if people are familiar with kind of key objectives and results. And that, for our product team, there was a big element of that, which is around key kind of objectives for the team and the product that everybody was collaborating and moving towards. So I think from that respect, we do kind of some key planning together as a group and collaboration. And there's key kind of metrics that we want to move the dial on. And that's kind of how we measure the team. I mean, there are individual OKRs and contributions towards that goal that obviously feed in. But outside of that, it's that ongoing communication and visibility of what everybody is doing and how everybody's contributing. And I think the good thing about the kind of team OKR is that it holds everybody accountable. And often the team kind of pick each other up on maybe when, oh, can you get that done for me? Or you weren't kind of, can you work with me on something so that we can meet the goal for the team together? So it becomes more of a kind of team accountability, which has been great.
What about you, Dileep? Have you changed how you measure productivity?
I think it's been, I think it's probably exactly the same. So the big thing with QA is you need to be very structured. So the approach that I took with quality assurance was basically very data-driven in the first place. So whether we were in or whether at the moment we've been working from home, it very much is reliant on things like escape defects. It very much is reliant on OKRs, like you just mentioned. So I'd probably say exactly the same, but I think the approach and the way that I work probably leads itself to being okay where we are right now. So I don't think we really have changed anything.
I think I spend a lot more time looking at that data than I used to. I've always tracked things like defect leakage, fail rates, things like that. But I think I spend more time living that data. I've always got it open in tabs and I'm refreshing screens and things like that and taking action. And I guess it's not really about productivity, but I tend to sort of appear more in different teams and different people's lives around the whole of the organization more, when it's easier to just ask the person doing the work than ask their manager for a status report. I find that I'm talking a lot more to people at all levels of the organization, whereas before I would kind of respect hierarchies a little bit more. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. initially. What about you, Nadia? Have you seen that?
So I would agree with Dileep and Anna here that I did not have a change. There's no change as far as how we're measuring performance, individual performance or team performance, because it was always, location or work choice agnostic. However, what I would say is during the pandemic specifically, so this is not necessarily applicable after the pandemic, it's an unprecedented time. So obviously there is definitely a factor of empathy at play, and the fact that it isn't by choice. And mentioned earlier, you might not have the right home setup. You might have, you can't send your kids to childcare in a lot of countries. So trying to take definitely an empathetic approach to it, and balancing between, is this a performance issue due to these factors, or is there something else at play when working through it? So that would be the only difference that I've seen, that I've experienced myself.
Okay, let's take another one of the questions. So audience question from Joe: how do you deal with people saying, oh, I'm just so productive or collaborative when I can talk to people in the same area? And also just absorbing conversations going on around, so you know what's going on in other parts of the business. I feel there's a way to do this remotely as well. So I guess that's that water cooler conversation. You miss out on finding out what someone else is doing accidentally, or people that feel that they can only be collaborative when they're together. So how do you think that can be replicated remotely? Anna?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that we've kind of experimented when we were kind of all fully remote. There's a couple of good tools. I think Slack's got one, and there's probably another where you can do you can get paired. It's like an auto coffee water cooler meetup, and you kind of get paired randomly with other colleagues, and you get to have kind of a remote meeting. Or we've had it where people have actually met up for a walk, when they could, which was nice, because they'd never, in some cases, they might not have even been on a kind of face-to-face Zoom meeting with each other in the early days. So that was really good to be able to get people to start collaborating and meeting. I think of this kind of idea of a buddy, especially for new starters, and often a buddy that's not in the same area as you. So you do get exposure to other areas of the business, not just from a work perspective, but from a social perspective as well, is a really good idea. And yeah, just trying to get people involved in different areas of the business when they can. So often having kind of advocates who would represent, say, tech more in a business meeting or more in a marketing kind of setup, to share maybe more ways of working. We do a lot of show and tells as well, which is really good, where we get everybody from the business involved in what we're doing. That's some ideas.
Nadia, how about you?
That's definitely something that comes up often. We need to acknowledge not everyone is comfortable with remote working. It's not for everybody. From our when we look at the data, we can say that for engineering, about 2/3 chose remote and flex, and about 1/3 chose to work from office. And what I hear often from people who chose to work from office is that they're currently suffering, really, they feel they're missing the connection, they're missing that water cooler conversation. Definitely did that Slack random pairing. We actually tried it with 2, and we think that 3 people is the ultimate number to rotate to choose. So it seemed like when we put 3 people together in a we call it coffee trio, works really, really well for us. And we do it at different levels. We do it for people across functions, in the same function, in the same group. We also did this idea of culture clubs. So each group have we basically, people can volunteer to be part of a culture club and organize events. And that's not just for fun events. That includes diversity, belonging, and inclusion events, book clubs, things like, how we're gonna, do new hire onboarding for our particular group. And it's just really the fact that people are brainstorming ideas. There's the budget for it. There's a very known budget they can spend every quarter. It's been a huge success. People feel a lot of ownership and excitement about just organizing these events. Again, they don't have to organize their whole thing. They just need to come up with an idea, and then the company would arrange it for them. So they just need to say, okay, here's what we want to do, and then it's paid for and then organized. And that's really been fantastic.
Cool.
Now, it's not the same as being in office for people who need it. It's just that right now we're in a pandemic. We just have to work with it. One other thing, we've even been arranging virtual events that are like game shows, like across like maybe a hall for a whole location. Yesterday we had one in EMEA, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, or The Weakest Link. That was great fun. Again, just homemade events like that, like Product Got Talent, stuff like that. And again, it's just really great fun. It's, again, I'm not saying it's all the same, but we have to work with what we've got during the pandemic. So that's what we've been doing.
What about you, Dileep? Have you been doing anything to try and get people to talk, I guess, not about what they're currently doing?
So probably similar to Nadia and Anna, we've taken a lot of those ideas. So I think show and tells have been really important. I think that coffee function on Slack has been great. I've met so many people who I didn't even know existed, or I didn't know much about them. So I've learned loads on that front. Just little things like we have a quiz organized on a weekly basis that has worked really well. We have catch-ups for our Birmingham team where we just talk to each other. We also have open meeting rooms, which has worked really well. So that's basically, we leave a meeting room open, and if anyone wants to actually engage in that meeting room in the day, and they just want to talk to someone, they can talk to anyone. So that's worked quite well. Also, what we used to do in the office that worked quite well was we had an open like camera. So if somebody was at home, they could feel as if they were in that meeting at the same time. So while we're at home, we leave certain meeting rooms open so that people can still collaborate in that way and they don't feel lonely. So I'd say, I'd probably say Nadia and Anna covered all of my examples. That was the only one that I wanted to add on top.
Yeah, I've tried a few of these things. I need to look into the coffee function on Slack. Clearly, that sounds cool. One thing I do to try and replicate the, overhearing someone else maybe working on something that you actually need to know about is I talk a lot about work out loud. I don't know if any of you are familiar with John Stepper's book, Work Out Loud, but it's all about telling everyone in the organization what you're doing. So if you're stuck on at the end of each day, just post what you're working on. Maybe someone will pop up and say, oh, you're having trouble with that? I worked on that last year. Or maybe you'll find that you're working on the same thing as someone else and collaborate. Or maybe someone will tell you that you don't need to do that because they've already solved that problem. So that's one thing I've been trying. So let's go to the next question. So how do you deal with the situation when you've hired someone on the remote first basis and then effectively change your mind and have a policy that people will be required to come into the office on a regular basis?
So I feel very strongly about this. So what I would say here is, best thing is to avoid being in that situation and just establish how you want to work, and if this is a temporary situation or you want to go hybrid. Now, let's say you found yourself in this situation, and it is the situation. Your business requires being in the office for most people, but you have people working remotely. My recommendation is to make the policy about manager approval based on certain criteria. Maybe they need to have certain seniority. Maybe they need to have previous experience working remotely. They need to be in certain roles that don't require certain equipment. I think you just need to establish the rules that you're following and stick to them for consistency. Otherwise, this unfairness situation will just make people resentful and eventually could cause attrition.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think there's two different roles we've been hiring recently. One is the developer role, and the other was a product manager role. And we, from the outset, said that the product manager role, we would like the ability to be available in Manchester for collaboration days, a couple of times a month or 4 mornings a month or something. But for the developer role, we felt that actually that role could be done fully remote, and that any of the kind of collaboration planning sessions, we'd already got process in place where we feel we could get that inclusivity there and that the role could be done. But I think for the product manager role, wanting that role to be close to our customers for that whole kind of discovery process, we didn't feel comfortable just yet that role could be fully remote. But we, from the outset, we kind of said that when we were advertising.
I mean, I think if you tell someone when you're hiring them that they're going to be remote and then change your mind later, it's like changing your mind about any other terms and conditions of employment.
Yeah.
In fact, so I'm based in Spain, and here they passed a law quite early on in the pandemic. Now, Spain hasn't been as remote orientated as, say, the UK historically, but they passed a very good law at the start of the pandemic, which forced me to write a contract with every employee who was working from home, telling them what I would pay for, telling them how much notice I would give them if they had to come into the office, and things like that. So I have to give them 2 weeks notice if I change my mind and need to get them back into the office. So I thought that was really good, really proactive. I think, but sure, I think if you tell someone one thing when you hire them and change your policy later, that's not fair.
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
So another question. If you are recruiting for a developer, would you now advertise the role globally? Who would like to answer that?
I'm happy to go, as it's something we've definitely been facing. So there's few factors, like there is, advertising it as remote versus advertising it as global, as in you can work from any country in the world. And if you want to say it's remote, that's fine. We already have a policy that about, making sure that our positions can, for the roles that allows it, are always by default can be remote. But the thing about global, though, is, just need to be very careful about the tax implications, the laws there, it's something, I think that you just need to basically review with your legal team about like implications of doing something like that. There's some companies that do it, and usually that's basically on a contract basis, and it's a different arrangement altogether. So they don't necessarily they're not on your payroll. So again, there's lots of factors. Now for us, we recognize there's the importance of having more entities available for location, and that's something we've been actively doing. We're adding more entities. So we have now, for this year, we added France and Germany as additional entities in Europe. We're adding additional entities now we're committed to adding even more entities. It doesn't mean opening an office, just making, doing all the necessary work to be legally able to open it as an entity. And that's something also you can look into.
Yeah, that's exactly what I found. I looked into this as well, and I was looking into whether I could hire developers in Germany from either my UK or my Spanish entity. And I would be liable for German social security and things like that. So I definitely need to find a German lawyer, a German accountant, set up some kind of entity. And at that point, I was like, are you sure you don't want to be a contractor? So yeah, you have to be quite careful with this kind of international stuff. And it's also very expensive to get advice on it in that particular area. Okay, so I'm just looking in the chat to see if we have any other questions. I don't think we do. So let's have a look at the poll results. So, okay. So the option with 0 votes is no hybrid work. We're going back to the office. It's interesting. The option with only 2 options with 1 vote, we're staying fully remote, and something else. Be interested to know what something else is. With 3 votes, we'll be deliberate about when we get together. And with 4 votes, we'll leave it up to individuals. The most popular option with 13 votes, is changing as I read it out, is X days per week in the office, which is interesting. So, which of these, we talked about collaboration days before. So I think, Anna, you're going more with we'll be deliberate about when we get together.
Yeah, I think deliberate, and I think that's different from different teams. From my perspective, for a tech product team, it's more about the collaboration times together. That might be 2 mornings over a week. and then maybe other sessions, but people would be able to come into the office and work there all the time individually if they wanted to, or maybe in pairs if they were working on a piece of work. So yeah, deliberate, but then let people decide outside of those kind of collaborative times.
Okay, and Dileep, are you putting yourself in the X days per week in the office bucket?
Yes.
Okay, and Nadia, do you think you fit inside these buckets? It didn't sound to me like you do.
It's more, I mean, we're technically leaving it to the individuals to choose, right? Like they could choose, but we're also deliberate, and that like we may have events in the future, and that would require flying people over, for example, and making sure that everyone is available for, like, let's say a big event or certain things we might do for collaboration and fun. But those are, those are an exception, right? We are leaving it up to the individual and making sure that we have all the frameworks and processes in place to make that successful. I do want to say that I believe, and again, this is maybe more a personal opinion, that just like looking as well at the market and the candidates, we're seeing that if you really want to be competitive in the tech market, you wanna be flexible for sure. And by not offering remote altogether, you're going to be losing on some candidates. And maybe that's completely fine if you already have a strong, healthy pipeline for candidates in that role. That's completely fine. If it doesn't suit your business, that's also perfectly fine. But if it does work for your business, then I did definitely a hybrid model, if you can work with it, would make you more competitive in the market for hiring candidates.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think instantly that for us, it's opened up the talent pool, and it's been easier to recruit, especially for the kind of development roles. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm somewhere in between being deliberate about when we get together and leaving it up to individuals and leaving it up to teams as well. That the teams should decide together how they're going to work. It can't all be about the individual, and it can't all be about the company anymore. Needs to have a team angle to it as well. Okay, well, listen, time is nearly up. So thank you, everybody who has come along and listened and asked questions. And I can see there's all sorts of interesting chat going on in the window on the side. Thank you very much, Nadia, Dileep, and Anna. It's been fantastic. And the whole recording of this will be, links will be posted, and it'll be available on Crowdcast in a couple of days, I believe. So thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.